Think about this. Is our world controlled more by, say, external forces, like in Orwell's 1984? Or is it something internal?
Yeah.
Maybe more like Huxley's Brave New World, where we're managed through constant fun and distraction.
That's exactly the question Neil Postman tackled back in 1985. His book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, made a really strong case that, yeah, Huxley's vision was closer to our reality.
A chilling thought, really.
It is, and it's why we believe some books, like this one, really need to be challenged and examined closely. So for this critique, we're using a specific approach. It's a step-by-step critical thinking framework, mapping claims to evidence, drawing on Paul and Elder's work.
Oh,
We also bring in an intellectual framework based on Mortimer Adler's ideas. And we look at ethical angles using the Golden Rule and the U.S. Preamble to spot any imbalances. Then we wrap up with a logical analysis for a balanced conclusion.
got it. And just so you, our listener, know what's happening, you're listening to a unique two-host AI conversation. This is powered by Google's NotebookLM, aiming for a deeper, more dynamic book critique. All right, let's dive in. Postman's core idea. It's pretty stark, isn't it? He claimed television didn't just give us new shows to watch. It actually rewired how we think.
Completely. He argued it turned everything, politics, news, even religion, into a form of entertainment. He saw it as a major shift, a change in our culture's epistemology, moving away from what he called the age of typography.
And into the age of show business.
Precisely. And his foundation for this, it's interesting, comes partly from Marshall McLuhan. McLuhan famously said, the medium is the message.
Right.
Postman tweaked that slightly. He said, the medium is the metaphor. The idea being that the form of communication, print, TV, whatever, doesn't just carry information. It actually shapes how we structure our thoughts, what we consider logical or true.
So each medium fosters its own way of knowing.
Exactly. It sets the rules for what counts as sensible discourse.
Okay, so let's talk about that age of typography he looked back on. We're talking, what, colonial times up to the mid-1800s?
Roughly, yes. An era dominated by the printed word. And Postman saw this period as demanding, well, serious business.
Serious intellectual business, you mean?
Yes, sustained mental effort. Imagine reading those incredibly long political pamphlets back then, or sitting through hours-long debates, like the Lincoln-Douglas ones. Print demanded literacy, obviously, but also the ability to follow really complex sequential arguments.
He uses that point about early presidents, doesn't he? How people knew figures like Washington or Jefferson primarily through their writing.
Right, we knew their ideas, their arguments. We didn't really know what they looked like standing at a podium or how charismatic they were on camera. Their authority came from reasoned words.
But here's where the critique comes in, using that framework you mentioned. Does Postman clearly define what counts as rational thinking, tied inherently to print?
That's a key question. And how strong is the evidence that everyone engaged at that high intellectual level just because print was dominant? Is he maybe idealizing that past a bit?
Yeah, I mean, was the age of typography genuinely this golden age of pure reason? Or just an age where people read lengthy stuff, which could still be biased or simplistic?
Exactly. Print was absolutely used for propaganda and stirring up emotions, too. So the critical thinking framework pushes us. Does the potential for rationality in a medium mean the medium guarantees or universally demands it? Postman argues yes, but is that a fully defended claim?
It's a tough distinction. The difficulty of reading complex text versus the actual quality or rationality of the ideas in that text.
Precisely. He gives great examples of high discourse, but we need to analyze if he generalizes too broadly from those examples.
Okay, so let's follow his narrative. Where did things start to go wrong in his view? He points fingers before TV, right? Back to the telegraph and photography.
He does. The telegraph, he argued, was the first big blow. It introduced what he called decontextualized information. Well, before the telegraph, news traveled slowly. It was usually local, something you could potentially act on or that directly affected your community. Suddenly, the telegraph floods you with news from everywhere, instantly.
A flood of facts without relevance.
Kind of news about a famine in China or a political dispute in France. Interesting, maybe, but largely irrelevant to your daily life or decisions. Postman saw this as creating passive information consumers overloaded with fragmented data points. The first step towards shattering coherent thought.
And the photography arrives, emphasizing the image over the written word.
Right. setting the stage for television. And when TV arrives, he sees the decline accelerate dramatically, especially in politics. He famously uses Ronald Reagan's presidency as a prime example.
The great communicator becomes Exhibit A for politics as show business.
Yes, but Postman's point wasn't just about Reagan himself or even his policies. It was about the public acceptance that an entertainment background, the performance aspect, was becoming more important than detailed policy debate. Politics shifting from reasoned arguments to compelling visuals.
The photo op, the soundbite.
Exactly. The carefully crafted image.
But hang on, isn't that a bit simplistic? Haven't politicians always used charisma, stage presence, appealing to emotions? Is he maybe forcing the evidence to fit his medium as the metaphor idea too neatly?
That's the challenge, isn't it? It's a valid critique. Postman definitely identifies a trend, the rise of the visual. But the logical analysis has to ask, did television cause this, or did it just powerfully amplify something already present in politics and human nature? He argues the medium itself discourages depth and complexity.
And that comes across most clearly, maybe, in his critique of televised news.
Oh, absolutely. He dissects the format itself, the theme music, the attractive anchors his memorable phrase, talking hairdos, the fast pacing, the commercial breaks.
All conventions borrowed from entertainment.
Right, and he argues these elements make sustained, serious thought practically impossible. How can you have a coherent discussion about, say, nuclear proliferation, then cut to a detergent commercial, then jump to a story about a local parade using the phrase, now this?
Now this. That phrase really stuck with him, didn't it?
He saw it as linguistic proof of the incoherence. It signals a complete break, actively discouraging any connection between the segments. It trains the viewer not to think connectively or critically about the flow of information.
And this logic, this entertainment imperative, didn't stay confined to news and politics. He saw it seeping into other crucial areas, like education. Okay, let's pause there for a moment. Just a reminder for everyone listening to this deep dive critique, check out Mindful Moments. That's a YouTube channel. We offer AI book analyses, summaries, critiques like this one, and podcasts. It's all designed to inspire reflection and, well, rational thought.
So, education. Postman famously took aim at programs like Sesame Street. And it's important to note his criticism wasn't about the intentions, which he acknowledged were good, or even the specific content bits.
It was about the form again, right? The medium being the metaphor.
Exactly. He argued that by presenting learning as this constant stream of fast-paced, funny, visually stimulating entertainment, it was teaching kids a damaging lesson. That learning itself should always be easy and amusing.
That struggle, sustained attention, hard thinking, those aren't required or even desirable. If it's not fun every second, something's wrong.
Precisely. If education must compete with cartoons and commercials for attention by adopting their methods, does it undermine the very nature of genuine learning? Learning often is difficult. It requires concentration, wrestling with ideas. Postman worried this entertainment model made that kind of intellectual labor seem unattractive, even unnecessary.
Which brings us back to that question. What is his definition of genuine learning? He seems to set a very high bar, tied implicitly to the focused, linear nature of print.
He does. He equates the medium's demands with the quality of learning. It's a provocative point.
And this leads to what he saw as the core ethical danger. If everything becomes entertainment, what happens to our role as citizens?
We become consumers. You consume news like you consume soda. You consume political candidates like you consume celebrities. You consume religious messages like you consume sitcoms.
So, applying those ethical frameworks, the golden rule, the preamble's goal of a more perfect union, does this shift undermine our ability to function as informed, responsible citizens?
Postman argues yes profoundly. He uses the term disinformation. Not necessarily lies or false facts, but rather information presented in a way that makes you feel informed while actually preventing deep understanding. It creates an illusion of knowledge.
That example he used about the Iranian hostage crisis coverage is really telling, isn't it?
Extremely telling. This was wall-to-wall coverage every night for 444 days back in the late 70s and early 80s. Non-stop images, updates, talking heads.
And yet,
Postman cites polls showing that after all that coverage, most Americans still had virtually no grasp of basic facts about Iran, its history, its culture, the political context of the revolution. They couldn't even find it on a map.
All that airtime, all those images, resulted in almost zero actual understanding.
Because the medium, television news, prioritized the ongoing drama, the visual spectacle, the daily countdown over the complex, nuanced, historical, and political background. It delivered information, sure, but in a form that actively discouraged comprehension.
We keep coming back to the structure. That phrase, "now this," as the ultimate symbol.
It's the verbal tick that reveals the underlying logic, or lack thereof, it says. Nothing is connected. Context doesn't matter. Just watch the next shiny thing.
And this logic isn't accidental, is it? It's driven by the commercial reality of television.
Absolutely. Ratings are king. What gets viewers? What keeps them from changing the channel? That becomes the main criterion for content, not necessarily truth or importance or complexity. Commercial viability trumps civic responsibility.
And he saw this creeping into print, too. You mentioned USA Today earlier.
Yes, he saw it as a prime example of print media adopting television's aesthetic. Lots of color, short articles, graphs, pictures, bite-sized information. Easy to scan, easy to digest, demanding very little sustained attention. Print imitating its perceived rival.
So, pulling the logical threads together, Postman's argument is incredibly consistent, isn't it? Entertainment values and serious public discourse are, in his view, fundamentally at odds.
They are oil and water. You can't mix them without corrupting the latter. And his final warning really echoes Huxley. The biggest threat isn't Big Brother forcing us into compliance. It's our own appetite for distraction, our willingness to be amused into apathy and ignorance. Cultural soma.
Okay, so for a balanced conclusion, Postman builds a compelling historical case for the decline of a print-based discourse. He provides strong examples, but
the entire weight of his argument rests on accepting that core premise. That information packaged as entertainment inevitably loses its depth, its seriousness, its connection to truth. Is that always the case? Or can entertainment sometimes be a vehicle for complex ideas? That's the point where listeners have to decide if they fully buy into his framework.
And the relevance today, 1985 seems like ancient history in media terms.
It does, but his critique feels almost prophetic, doesn't it? Everything he diagnosed about television, the fragmentation, the emphasis on visuals, the demand for constant stimulation, the shrinking attention spans, it's all been amplified, arguably, by orders of magnitude in the internet and social media age.
So why should you care? Because the forces he described are potentially shaping our world, our politics, our very minds even more powerfully now.
And just to formally note, as we conclude, this critique, this whole analysis, was conducted using a systematic methodology. We drew on established frameworks for critical thinking and intellectual analysis to really unpack the book's claims and evidence thoroughly.
So the final thought to leave you with. If Postman was right, if the medium truly is the metaphor, what's the dominant medium shaping us right now? Is it the algorithm, the endless scroll, AI-generated content that perfectly mimics human thought? And what kind of thinking, what epistemology is it creating that we might not even recognize yet, just like people didn't fully grasp television's impact back in 1985? Something to reflect on. Click the link on screen for our in-depth book analysis. Please subscribe, share, maybe purchase the book via the link, and above all, think rationally.
And check out our other genre-based book podcasts at Mindful Moments. Subscribe and nourish your mind on the go.